Do you guys think you can make good money running a microgreens business? I mean, I know that's what all the gurus are saying nowadays, but is it really true? In this video, me and Andy Mussaw of Fresh Shores Farms are going to help you set some realistic expectations. Whether you're thinking of starting or you're deciding whether you want to scale your business, we're going to talk about the earning potential of a microgreens business. So stay tuned. It's not, it's not perfect, but this is kind of the general what I'm seeing in the microgreen space as far as earning potential. And on the bottom graph here, we have revenue. And on the top graph, we have owner earnings. So that's net profit per owner. This is how much you can actually end up putting in the bank, and that's per owner. So this is kind of what I'm seeing most people do that get in the microgreen space. They get a little bit of momentum, they start making a little bit of money, and they drop out. A lot of times they live in the middle of nowhere and they have trouble finding a market. People aren't buying microgreens. The restaurants aren't into high-end food, and the grocery stores, have minimal selection. And some continue to grow for fun or to feed their family, but it turns out to be more challenging than they thought for a lot of folks, and they need to make real money. And so they throw in the towel early, and it's like probably what they should do. It's probably a smart decision at that point. But you can learn a skill, learn how to grow microgreens, and you can help feed your family. And it's usually not a total loss for people who give it a try. They usually learn something and can apply it to their next venture. Then this is what I call the decent side hustle zone. This takes us all the way to like maxing out your home space, your spare bedroom, garage, etc. Maybe you bring in one part timer to help, like 1 day a week, but otherwise you're probably doing all the work yourself. A couple days are probably light, but it's a 7 day a week affair. You have to be there doing something pretty much every day. So it's tough to take vacations. You can kind of forget about vacations unless you live in an area like a resort area where they close down, at the end of the season. Some ski areas, all the businesses just close for a few weeks. So if you live in that kind of area, you can still maybe get vacations, but it's something to think about. It's very hard to make median wages in your area. So it's kind of best I've found for a second income earner, someone who's retired, semi-retired, like a homeschooling parent, a stay-at-home parent, or someone who lives cheaply and can just make it work on kind of a little bit of a lower wage. So you're topping out based on the capacity of your home grow space. And that home grow space really saves you money because you're not paying extra for rent, your utilities are all thrown in there. And that's what then brings a lot of people to the next area. This is what I call the living wage zone. You're not okay just making 30, 40 grand. You want to make a good wage for your area. You want to try to get up to 50, 60, 70 grand and make a median or better wage in your area. So that's when a lot of people kind of take this leap. And from the people I've talked to, some of the best operators, they're like topping out 50, 60K. And this is difficult. This is challenging. As soon as you scale beyond home growing, you become inundated with expenses and begin the challenges of bringing on maybe your first employee or working with a partner. The ones that I've seen that do this still keep their employees to a minimum, and they just kind of bust in their butts. And they're trying to be cost conscious, trying to find cheap rent. I've seen it work best for people that are focusing on chefs in a great market. They're by a city or a popular vacation destination, and they're ideally to smooth out these lines a little bit, trying to get chefs on standing orders. And there's usually not a lot of automation. And then
Yeah, and
this
that's
is
probably the toughest leap right there is you're going into potentially commercial space with a lease, potentially hiring employees, adding all kinds of extra expense. So it's a tough go right through there for sure, especially if you go in blind.
Yeah, you're adding some layers of complexity. So this drops quite a bit right here because you're investing in a space. That's a big expense. Space and utilities is quite a big expense. And then you kind of start making a little bit more money again. Then you need to bring on someone to help you. You don't have the capacity to do it all yourself. It drops down again. And then you start getting it back up, and you getting back up in this area and you're feeling optimistic again. You're like, oh man, this is great. I'm just going to keep going with this. I'm going to start investing in automation, investing in more employees, a lot of investments. So this curve starts to go up and down a lot again. Things get a little bit more choppy. This zone is green because I'm like, go for it, people. Like this is something you can definitely do. This takes a little bit more challenge and caution, and you really need to think before you go this phase. In this phase here, it's very, very challenging. Some of the challenges encountered are people management. once you get bigger, your revenue gets in these higher numbers, you're bringing on more employees. Employee turnover can start to become challenging. Managing everyone's challenging. Customer churn, customer service difficulties. So once your operation gets a lot bigger, you have a lot more customers. It can be hard to give them all the attention that they need. And you may miss some things here and there, and you start having some little things come in that your customers might not love, and then other people are knocking at their door offering their microgreens. Probably you'll start to get a little bit more churn here. Or you work with a
Yeah,
distributor and you think it's great and you're growing 5 racks for this distributor, and all of a sudden they go with someone else and boom, a big drop, and it's just up and down, up and down.
definitely
Investment.
looking at much bigger accounts in that area for sure, and that can certainly swing up and downward for sure.
And people start buying some expensive equipment. They start investing in automation, automatic harvesters, soil fillers in the trays, automated watering, and
Yep.
those some of those machines can be pretty expensive.
Oh yeah, yeah. The automated harvesters run about at least $25,000 by itself.
Another thing they can run into in this phase is just kind of their market just tapping out. Like they're just struggling to find more opportunities because there's only so much capacity in your market. You need to just expand out wide at some point to find more
Yep.
opportunities. And they start
Yeah.
diversifying a lot of times. When they're looking for more opportunities, they're diversifying their markets. So they might be focused on chefs in this area, but to see themselves getting up here, they start doing different stuff, selling to distributors, grocery stores, farmers markets, and it just when you're spread, it can there can be more inefficiencies that kind of come into place and more complexity. And all these issues that are happening in this phase can just lead to owner burnout, which makes the owner less effective in general. And it can stagnate the growth of the curve. But if you can get through this really choppy area here, I think there is potential to expand beyond 50, 60 grand in retained earnings for the owner. And maybe you can kind of talk about that because I showed you this chart the first time and you're like, this is like tracking exactly with what I was thinking our business would do. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we had always thought if we could get the business to $400,000 a year, which I know sounds insane to some people, it's not impossible. It's tough, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely reachable. But if you can get to that point, then you could have 10 full-time employees, that are working 40 hours a week that you're paying, let's say $40,000 a year, which is crazy high for an employee. But even if you were paying them $40,000 a year, now you've canceled out that $400,000 that you're making essentially. At that point, when you're paying that amount of money in employees, your lease, your electric bill, all that stuff, you're not even going to think about that nearly as much because it's going to be pennies compared to what you're actually paying your workers. When you get to this level, you almost have to have automation. $25,000, $30,000 harvesting machine is going to cancel out a ton of time just because if it takes, let's say, 5 employees all day to harvest 1,000 racks or 1,000 trays, I mean, that same amount of trays can be pushed through an automated harvesting machine in probably a few hours, by one person or two people. If you take those same 5 employees, think about the growth you could get in your actual business, having the same amount of people do 5 to 10 times the amount of actual trays every single week. So it allows you to like significantly grow the capacity of your business with the same crew. That's where automation really comes into play, but it's got to be worth it. I mean, obviously don't go out and buy an automation machine if you're in the green zone or even early in the yellow zone, because it's going to be really tough to make that money back. It's better when you're getting big enough to where you can say, okay, do I hire 2 more people or do I just buy a piece of automation that's going to replace potentially 4 people, depending on how it plays out. So yeah, that's where things get a little hairy. But yeah, we always thought $400,000 was our goal, and everything on top of that should be really good. Because then you
Yeah,
pretty much have maxed out your farm. You shouldn't never ever have to hire more than 10 full-time people ever. I don't care how big your farm is, you should find automation tools to take care of some of that without a doubt. So yeah,
yeah,
it's funny how this lines up so well with kind of what we've seen in our own world, having to slog through, without having anybody tell us how to do a lot of this stuff.
yeah.
We've kind of figured it out on our own. So that's why we like sharing our knowledge with people and how you can do this more intelligently.
Yeah, and I got, some of these several of these data points just like from talking to actual microgreens farmers. I'm not going to say names or anything, but like right here, this zone right here, this is one of the best growers that I've talked to, and he's at around 180, 200 in revenue, and he's bringing in close to 50 to 55,000 per owner. So there's basically two owners working on this business. On their 190, 200 grand, they're bringing actually about 100 profit or close to it, but they have two owners working on it. So this right here lines up perfectly with what I'm seeing. But a lot of these folks, they're seeing, I call this visionary optimism. They're seeing that this continues on their same trajectory, and it's just more challenging with that. The complexity of this area is just a trap that a lot of visionaries fall into, of thinking things are going to continue smoothly when there's these all these new challenges that kind of come into this phase. And I just made this new thing on here, Andy, that you didn't see last time. I called it Andy. This is the Andy's chart. This is kind of what I see you. So this isn't necessarily the typical path. This is more someone that's trying to stay efficient and bootstrap it the whole way. Whereas Andy,
Yeah.
you're investing a little bit more heavily into your growth in the future.
Yeah.
Whereas yours
Yep.
is more like this, where you're
Yeah.
investing heavily the entire way in anticipation that you'll start climbing up here a little earlier than these people probably, because you're just
Yeah.
really investing in your systems and getting everything dialed in and putting the money into automation early and everything like that.
Yeah. And the really big challenge is going from, the yellow to red. You're oftentimes moving into a bigger space at that point. In the yellow, you got a smaller space. Now you've maxed it out. Now what's the next step? And that involves having to move out into a bigger space, which is going to involve more money up front, to get that new space set up. And that's where a lot of that money goes right up front. And you're potentially having to hire more employees, because ultimately, for you to get out, if you're the sales guy, you need to be able to have the time to go make those sales. And if you don't have time, then the only way you can make time is either hire a salesperson, or you go out and do it yourself and you hire more people to do the actual farm work. And that's what my direction has been since the beginning, was to really build this solid foundation with really well trained employees that have been with me for multiple years, and be able to just build this empire on top of them. And we're almost there. I mean, we're so close. Like, in the next month and a half, we'll be in a space that's twice the size of what we're in right now. And at that point, I will be a full-time salesperson, and that's all I'm going to be doing. My farm will be managed by my employees, but obviously, to get that freedom comes with a lot of cost, a lot of investment we
Yeah.
had to put in. I mean, we didn't take a vacation for 3.5 years, for a long time. So it's tough. That's the one challenging part with being a farmer. If you're going to bootstrap your way through it, like Nate said, then you got to understand that you're not going to have any time off anytime soon. You're going to be working 6 7 days a week for the most part. And even honestly, when you're not physically working, you're always thinking about your business, or you should be, to a certain extent. So, I wake up in the middle of the night and think, oh, I should post this on social media, or oh, I should do this, video, or oh, I should work on this today, or I forgot to follow up with that client, or whatever. So it's a 24/7 thing, once you
Yeah.
actually get really heavy into it. So even on days when I'm not physically in the farm, I'm still working on other things outside of the farm just to keep things moving forward, come up with other revenue streams. Do we want to get into flowers? Do we want to get into growing herbs like basil and, stuff like that, or lettuces? So we're always thinking about different possibilities that we can grow the business. Because just in case, if we burn out microgreens in this area, we want to have other options to be able to put
Yeah.
out there to keep the business sustainable. So, but yeah, that's kind of our direction. It's not recommended, unless you really can pull it off financially. Luckily my wife still works full time, and that's the main reason why we're able to do it. If I was doing this completely by myself full time, it'd be a whole different avenue, because I would have to do all the work, to make sure that we were able to grow the business, without having to pay employees and rent and things like that. But
Yeah.
if you've got a large building or a decent amount of space in a basement or something like that, I mean, highly recommend stay in your house as long as you can.
Yeah.
It's going to save you a
This
ton of money. You can grow the business the best that way, for sure, with minimal
this
expenses.
this point right here is not a bad spot to just stay and stick it out.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, like I said when
Yeah.
I was talking about it, if you can afford to stay in this area, you're getting a good bet. I mean, you might be making 40 grand on just 60, 70 in revenue. So it can be pretty low stress and pretty good profit margin for what you're doing.
Yep.
When you're getting ready to take this leap, this is really when you want to give it a lot of thought. about going on to this next phase because the expenses that come in, the additional expenses of the space, and then probably needing to bring on your first employee, that's a big learning curve for a lot of entrepreneurs. And there's going to be this dip. And you should give it some good thought before you try to traverse that dip. And we were talking about this last time, and me and Andy have said, like, we want to work together somehow. Because I met Andy, I interviewed him a couple years ago, and I was just so impressed with everything he's doing and how dialed in his business is, even with him doing all these different selling in all these different markets. I was just so impressed on how dialed in you have everything. So I wanted to like work with you somehow. And when I showed you this chart
Yeah.
last week, we just came up with this idea of helping people climbing this green curve decide if they want to go on to the yellow and red, but mostly yellow. What are some of the things they really need to think about when they're making this leap? Do you want to talk about kind
Yeah.
of the
So
four things that we talked about?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I mean, the biggest thing is going to be finding the right space, and that boils down to so many factors. But some of the key factors are, things like HVAC capacity, plumbing capacity. What's your electric look like? And these things, I mean, plumbing, for example, can be somewhere between like $10,000 and $25,000 to have sinks installed and lines ran and everything else. HVAC, if it has no HVAC, I mean, you're probably looking at least $30,000, if not 100 plus thousand dollars, just depending on how big the space is, what kind of capacity of unit they need to put into. They need to literally crane it up onto a roof to install it. I mean, those things can add up really quickly. And then electrical easily could be 3,000 on the low end, maybe up to 15 to $20,000 to have electrical work done. If you're upgrading the service, if there's not enough service there, or if you're having a bunch of dedicated outlets put in, dedicated circuits, because you have to have those. I mean, in order to run this business at a high level, you've got to have access to dedicated outlets that you can run racks off of. And we know how many racks we can run off of each dedicated circuit, so we know how many we need to put in. But a lot of that comes into actually finding the actual space. And that's where we realize there's a lot of people coming out of the green that are trying to go into the yellow that have never looked at commercial space before, have no clue what they're looking at. And you can very easily fall prey to excitement. You can walk into a space and be like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. And then when you finally really look at it after you've already signed the lease and it's too late, you may find, oh my gosh, there's only 200 amps of service in the whole building. And the HVAC runs on that electric system. And I've barely got any electric circuits I can even use. And now I've got this 4,000 square foot building that I can only run 6 racks in. It's a giant waste at that point. So little things like that we've gone through ourselves because we were in that same boat at one point, but we've learned our lessons the hard way. And that was kind of our thought, was like, let's help people get from the green to the yellow with success and save literally tens of thousands of dollars on what you won't have to actually purchase if you take the time to find the right space.
Yeah.
And that's something that we can certainly help you do. So that was kind of our
Yeah.
thought, and we thought it was a
Yeah.
really cool thing. It just doesn't exist out there. So
Yeah, we were kind of saying like there's a few different things that people really need to think about. Space being a big one. There's people, there's sales, and there's like getting their systems in place. But like space was the big first one where a lot of people mess up and it costs them tens of thousands of dollars. So I was
yeah.
like, Andy, why don't we put together just like a master class that where you talk about everything with space? Because Andy's been through the ringer with this. He's been to a couple different spaces and he's had many of these unexpected things crop up on him, and it's cost him. He's shelled out the money. I mean, this is a real learning
Oh
thing for
yeah.
Andy. He's got
Yeah.
the battle scars to prove it. And if you're in the green, I think that this class, Andy's just going to talk about everything you need to think about. It'd be good for you to go through the class if you're in the green and thinking about the yellow, just to do your due diligence. But if you know you want to go through the yellow, it'd be the dumbest thing ever to not take this class and save
Yeah.
yourself a ton of money. And so we're going to put together this class, and Andy's going to record the whole thing, or maybe we'll do it together. And then we're going to let people have a week to watch it and ask any questions. And we're going to record a Q&A. And Andy's being super generous. He's also including a consultation, a free 30-minute consultation for anyone who takes the class. So you can use that consultation, to show him the spaces you're looking at, and he can review them with you and see if he sees anything that you're not thinking about. Just ask him any questions about moving into a new space. There'll be a link below this video if you guys are interested in taking that class. We're just opening it for pre-sales, and I think we're thinking we're going to do this, what, March 1st, right around the beginning of March.
Yeah, probably around there, yeah. That should be enough time to get
Okay.
it recorded and done. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I
So
mean, it would be the best $100 you ever literally ever spent. Trust me, I'm a guy who spent tens of thousands out of my own pocket to get my spaces up to where they needed to be because I didn't take the time to do things right. I learned the lessons the hard way, and I'm trying to help you save a lot of money by going down this road. But yeah, on the consults, I mean, we can talk about laying out your space. We can talk about whatever you'd like. I mean, if it's more related to your microgreens business, that's fine too. But we want to try and keep it geared towards the topic if we can, just to help
yeah.
you really understand. But obviously, the class is going to be very informative. So whatever if you have any additional questions beyond that, then certainly we can help out with that.
Yeah, you go through the class, you see everything you need to know, you start looking at spaces, you find a couple that you think fit the bill or one that you think fits the bill. Book your consultation with Andy then, jump on the call, show him what you're looking at, talk him through your thought process of why you think it's a good space, and Andy will look at it, and he can give you a thumbs up or thumbs down whether he thinks it's a good bet for you. But that's going to be a big decision that can really set you up for future success and can really make things a lot easier.
Yeah, because I mean, if you can transition from the green to the yellow, what we see in that graph is that giant drop, and most of that is related to those expenses you have to spend up front to get even moved in. You take a lot of that away, and you're really, other than canceling out whatever your new lease payment is and whatever your new utilities are, which hopefully you've got that taken care of ahead of time before you make this decision. It's going to save you a ton of just money out of pocket, not having to worry about dealing with banks, loans of any kind. I mean, obviously, the ideal scenario is always to self fund your own business if you can. Because then you're not paying any interest, basically. So if we can help you avoid having to shell out a lot of personal money or take out loans and deal with banks and things like that, because banks mean you have to write a business plan. Basically, nobody wants to spend time doing that. So we can help you
Yeah.
avoid that piece of it too, potentially. But yeah, it's very informative. We've already typed up kind of an outline of it, and it's awesome. It's
Yeah.
awesome. So
Yeah, and
can't recommend it enough.
1 week since we talked about this, Andy typed up his outline already of a bunch of stuff he would talk about, and like it's extensive. I mean, I'll admit, I was just a home grower and I wouldn't have thought about half that stuff going into a space. And I would be one of the people that would
Yep.
that would screw up. I would go into a space and was like, "Oh, this feels real nice." Like, and this has enough space to fit all my racks, and I would just lease it, and then I'd get in there and it'd cost me 30 grand to upgrade the plumbing, put in a floor drain and upgrade the electrical.
Yep.
I would fall into that trap. But your notes are already extensive. I mean, even as far as what people will need to know if they want to be gap certified. There's certain things about a space
Yeah.
that you need to check into ahead of time if you want to be gap certified. Like we're going to get into details like that in the on the recording.
Yeah, that's why you really have to think long term, not just short term. And it's really hard to do that unless you really, really are. I don't want to say a visionary, but you almost have to be able to really think through all of these possibilities. So, let my suffering be your gift to help you actually bypass a lot of the same things that we've gone through as a result of learning things the hard way. But the challenge is there's not many people out there that are in a position where they've moved into commercial space. And if they have, they're either not going to admit that they made mistakes, they're not going to admit that they had any problems, they're not going to admit that they had to spend extra money. They just want you to think their business is the best thing on the face of the earth and that they do no wrong. I'm a humble guy. I'm going to happily sit here and tell you I've made a lot of stupid mistakes trying to get this business moving to where it is, and that's what I'm trying to help you avoid. That's what it
Yeah.
boils down to.
There's a lot of
So,
people online that'll tell you your microgreens business is going to do this, guys, and it's just
uh-huh.
no, we're going to delete that because that's not reality.
Yeah. Any
You know,
any
we
business you start, you're looking at 2 to 3 years most likely before you're really gonna start making good money. And what you're seeing, in the 2nd and 3rd year for the most part is where that yellow and that red come into play. But once you can get through that red portion, and obviously these numbers aren't exactly where yours may fall, depends on a
yeah.
lot of scenarios, obviously. But at least it kind of gives you an idea of the initial success and then potentially some struggle and some craziness, and then the long run you're going to have success. It's just getting through that process, and we can help you get there. That's really the goal.
Yeah, if you guys are in the green here, and you're thinking about whether you want to go into the yellow zone and start to get a space and maybe hire your first employee and scale up, or whether you're going that route, I mean, best bucks you'll ever spend. And
Yeah.
like we said, it's going to record the full masterclass. Annie's going to record that, and then we're going to let you watch that, give you a full week to ask any questions. Then we're going to record a Q&A. We might end up doing that live as well. We're not sure yet. And then you also are going to get a consultation with Andy so you can run your new space by him and talk about any considerations of your new space that you need to think about ahead of time. So we'll put the
Yeah.
link to that below this video, or somewhere else on this page, wherever you end up watching it. So look for that link if you guys want to sign up. We're really excited to do this.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I have helped students, that I've already coached, work into a new space, and it can go one of two ways. They either listen or they don't, and the ones that don't usually end up paying the price. And I mean, I literally just had a coaching call a couple days ago with somebody, and they already posted this morning that they already signed the lease on the new space, and I barely even looked at it. So it is what it is. I was there. I tried to offer advice. Whether they took it or not is on them. But I would highly advise what you learn from this video, put it into practice, because I'm telling you right now, it's literally, and I'm not kidding, the difference between tens of thousands of dollars that you'll have to spend. Trust me.
Yeah.
And honestly, this is probably one of the most needed things in the industry.
Yeah.
Seriously. I mean,
Yeah.
because there's
I
so many
agree.
people just like me that I've talked to already. I mean, literally, I had a call with this guy on Saturday, and the next day he posted, "Oh, I signed the lease." I'm like, "Come on, man." But it's the same thing. You just go, "Wow, look how pretty this building is. This is so cool. I get to move into this space." And you just ignore all reality. And, when I went looking for the space we're in now, it's perfect. Other than the fact it doesn't have a ceiling that's going to work with gap, which I didn't know until way after the fact. So it's just like, yeah, that's what ended up killing me. I thought I was going to be like, well, I got to do some basic plumbing, which is no big deal, some basic electric, which is no big deal. But now this ceiling, I mean, it's going to be about 25 grand to do the ceiling. I've got the quotes already.
I hope you guys found that super valuable, informative. And if you want to join the class, I'll put a link below this video. And I feel like spring's a popping here in Indiana. We got our garlic starting to come up. So hope you guys have a wonderful spring. I'll talk to you later.